The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Midweek Analysis.
Hey guys, this is a midweek analysis for July 21st of 2021. Alright, we'll start off with the pound dollar. This is the monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So there was a weak double bottom right here. And since weak double bottoms typically do not go its target height, generally in this level right here, in the long term, I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. However, last week, there was a rather strong short trade that formed right here. And currently, I'm waiting for another weekly long trade to form so I could gauge its strength against the previous short trade and then decide the short-term bias. So in the short term, I'm neutral biased. Alright, let's talk midweek price. Alright, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So there was a strong short trade that formed right here. Then a week long trade formed. So as price pulled back, I was looking for short entries right back down to this pivot low as a target. And that target was hit. And so as price pulled back, I was still looking for short entries on the lower time frames. However, at this level right here, there was compact long price action that formed that changed the bias to long. Or in other words, it changed the bias into prices likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Then several months ago, that target was hit. Then about 2 months ago, a strong short trade formed right here. And then on last week's weekly forecast, I mentioned that an even stronger long trade formed right here. And so I took a long trade at this 1.3790 level right here, with the stop loss at this pivot low right here, with the conservative target being right here, and its main target being right up here. Now, as you can see, price came right back down to stop out that long trade stop loss level right here. So at this point, I took a 60 pip loss. Now, upon reanalyzing why this long trade got stumped out, let me show you what I found out. So let me just get rid of this. Okay, again, so the reason why I took a long trade at this level right here is because this short trade, upon the first analysis, was weaker than this last long trade right here. Now, upon reanalyzing, I found that this short trade was actually stronger than this long trade. And the essential element I did not analyze correctly was that actually a strong weekly gap was not accounted for the future short strength of this short trade. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you this gap. It's on this weekly chart. So let me just zoom out and pull all the way back. Alright, so on this weekly chart, way back in 2016, there was a quite large weekly gap in this area right here. Now this big gap is actually constructed through many small gaps. So as you can see, there's a gap here, right here. There's another one right here, and there's one here and here. There's a big one right here and here. Now, if you connect all these gaps, you'll find that there's no space in between each gap. Thus, it creates one big gap right here. Now, I was aware of this gap. However, I did not think that short trade reached that price level of this gap. However, upon reanalysis, I found that it did. Now, that price level that short trade reached is this price level right here. Now, I did not take into account this minor gap right here, which further extended this big gap to lower levels. And this little extension of the width of this gap actually touched that short trade's pivot high at this level right here. And so if I take into account the future short strength of this big gap, that would actually make that short trade slightly stronger than that last long trade. So let's go back and look at that trade setup. Okay, so upon reanalyzing, I found that this short trade, because of that big gap, was actually slightly stronger than this last long trade. And thus, as price pulled back on the lower time frames, I should have been looking for short entries, with its main target being the stop loss of that last long trade, which is right here. Alright, so let me just go ahead and re-update this weekly buy setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So again, a strong short trade formed right here. That was stronger than this last long trade. So as price pulled back, I was looking for short entries right back down to this pivot low as a target. And that target was hit. And then as price pulled back in these levels, I was still looking for short entries because the bias was still short. However, at this price level right here, compact long price action form, which changed the bias to long, or in other words, changed the bias to prices likely to reach this pivot high right here before reaching this pivot low. And that target was hit at this level right here. And then a strong short trade formed right here. Then 2 weeks ago, a weaker long trade formed right here. So as price pulled back, I should have been looking for short trades right back down to this pivot low as a target. All right, so at this point, what I'll be looking at is basically the same setup. So I'll be waiting for another weekly long trade to form. And then I'll gauge its strength. And if this long trade is stronger than the last weekly short trade, then I'll be long biased right up to this pivot high as a target. And on the other hand, if this long trade is weaker than this last short trade, then again, I'll wait for price to pull back as much as possible so I could take a short right back down to that pivot low as a target. All right, so one last thing I do want to add in terms of trade management is on the 4-hour chart. So let's go over there. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, I took that long trade at this 1.3790 level right here with a stop loss at this pivot low right here and its conservative target right up here. Now, if you recall in the weekly forecast, I was mentioning that there were many strong long trades that formed right here and here, and many weak short trades. However, on this 4-hour chart, price still managed to come right back down to stop out those strong long trade stop losses at this level right here. And so I was mentioning that there was a lot of short-term short strength. And thus, even as price pulled back, giving me a good risk to reward ratio because my stop loss is at this pivot low right here, I will not be taking any more long entries. Now, hypothetically, if I did not pay attention to this 4-hour chart bias, I perhaps might have taken more long entries as price pulled back in these areas. For trades in these areas are very tempting due to the great risk to reward ratio since the stop loss is at this level right here. So in terms of trade management, watching the lower time frames bias and figuring out whether there was short-term short strength actually saved me from possible further losses. So one thing to remember is that if you're taking trades on the weekly chart, watching the 4-hour and 1-hour bias and seeing if there's any short-term strength in the opposing direction you're trading in can actually save you from further losses, like in this scenario right here. Okay, so let's go back to the weekly chart. Alright, so on this weekly chart for the time being, I'm just waiting for another weekly long trade to form so I could gauge its strength against the last weekly short trade. And if this long trade is stronger than the last weekly short trade, then I'll be looking for long trades with its stop loss at this new long trades pivot low right here and its main target being right up here. And moreover, if this long trade is weaker than the last short trade, then again I'll be waiting for a pullback as much as possible so I could take a short trade right back down to the last long trade stop loss level, which is right here. Okay, so let's go on to the Usdjpy pair. Okay, this is the monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. Alright, so ultimately I'm expecting price to fall right back down to this 101 pivot low level right here. But before that, I was talking about the pullback to 104, then to 109, and then down to 101. So in the long term, I'm still short biased right back down to this 101 pivot low level right here. However, on the weekly chart, there was a short trade that formed in this level right here. And for the time being, I'm waiting for another weekly long trade to form so I could gauge its strength against the last weekly short trade. So in the short term, I am neutral bias. Alright, let's talk midweek price. Okay, this is a weekly chart. For a full explanation of the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months, please refer to this week's weekly forecast. Alright, but at a basic level, the setup I've been looking at is that the last weekly long trade that formed was right here with its stop loss at this pivot low right here. And then in my opinion, this long trade hit its target at this 109 level right here at a monthly downward trend line. And then last week, another weekly short trade formed right here. So I mentioned in the weekly forecast that if I could get a pullback to this 110.60 levels right here, I'll be taking a short entry with the stop loss at this pivot high right here and its main target right here. Now, upon re-examining this hypothetical short trade I've been talking about, I decided not to take that short entry even if I do get a pullback to 110.60. Now, let me go ahead and explain to you why. So like I explained in the weekly forecast, this weekly short trade's main target would be a daily long stop loss level at this level right here. However, typically, since I'm taking a weekly short trade, the main target will be the last weekly long trade right here at its stop loss at this level right here. However, like I mentioned earlier, this long trade's main target in my opinion, was hit right here at this 109 level. And that's why I took out my entire position at this level on this long trade. So at this point, this weekly short trade's target cannot be this long trade's weekly stop loss level right here. For this long trade's target was hit and this general trade already being concluded. And thus, moreover, I decided to target the last daily long trade stop loss level, which is right here for this weekly short trade. However, I did not mention this in the weekly forecast, but the last daily long trade that formed in this area also already hit its main target at these levels right here, where there are many weekly gap levels. And furthermore, another daily short trade formed in this area right here, which also hit its target at weekly gap levels here. So at this point, in terms of the daily chart, price really does not have a clear bias, for both long trades and short trades hit their main targets already. So for the time being, at least on the daily chart, since there's indecisiveness or neutrality in its market bias, upon reanalyzing this pair, I decided to wait for another weekly long trade to form. And then similar to the pound dollar, I'm going to gauge its strength against the last weekly short trade that formed right here. And again, if this long trade is stronger than this last weekly short trade, at that point I'll take a long right up to this pivot high as a target with a stop loss at this pivot low. And conversely, if this long trade is weaker than this last short trade, at that point I'll consider taking a short entry, or in more detail, I'll wait for a pullback as much as possible close to this last weekly short trade stop loss level, so I could take a short right back down to the last weekly long stop loss level as a target. Alright, so on this pair also, I'm just going to be waiting for a weekly long trade to form to decide the direction of future trades. Okay? Alright, so that's it for the midweek analysis. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And thanks for watching. Okay, bye.